Judiciary of Indonesia. In Indonesia's judicial system, the Supreme Court, Mahkamah Agung, in Jakarta, is the final court of appeal. High courts, which are located in principal cities, deal with appeals from district courts. Supreme Court judges are chosen by the President, who selects from nominees presented by the Judicial Commission, a special body whose members are appointed by the upper house. The Chief Justice and his or her deputies are chosen from among the Supreme Court justices by the justices themselves. According to the original 1945 Constitution, the Supreme Court does not have the power of judicial review. In 2003, however, the Constitutional Court, Mahkamah Konstitusi, was established to review and to rule on cases involving charges against the President. Judges are members of the civil service and are managed by the Supreme Court, but they also are supervised by the Judicial Commission. The National Ombudsman Commission, established in 2000, deals with offenses committed by the state. Under the colonial administration, the law was a mixture of Dutch law and local customary law added. Since independence, criminal law has been codified for all of Indonesia. Civil law, however, has continued to be based largely on adat, which varies from one region and ethnic group to another. There are 4 judicial spheres for general, religious, military, and administrative matters, each with its own courts. The religious, military, and administrative courts deal with special cases or particular groups of people, while the general courts handle both civil and criminal cases. Muslims may choose to use Islamic law in some civil cases. Since the mid-1970s, religious law has applied to all civil matters dealing with marriage. Political process. Indonesia's political process is shaped by the country's turbulent political history. The first election after independence was held in 1955. Almost 170 political parties and factions contested, and 4 major parties obtained the majority of the votes. The election was carried out with little disturbance, but the resulting government was beset by unforeseen political problems. Sukarno, Indonesia's first national figure and the first president, dissolved the elected assembly, introduced a concept known as the guided democracy, and reinstated the 1945 Constitution in 1959. The period of guided democracy was marked by the creation of a plethora of ministers, by the rise of the Indonesian Communist Party, Partai Komunis Indonesia, PKI, to a position of political dominance, and by the emergence of the army as a major anti-communist political force. The structure collapsed with an attempt coup d'etat in 1965, which led to the downfall of Sukarno. Under Suharto, Sukarno's successor, Indonesia entered a new political era, officially called the New Order. After the period of stabilization and restructuring in which the army played a major role, the second election of the DPR was held in 1971. Contesting this election were 9 political parties and the Joint Secretariat of Functional Groups, Secretariat Bersama Golongan Karya, Sekber Golkar or Golkar, a government-sponsored organization of non-affiliated groups, including non-party association of farmers, fishermen, civil servants, cooperatives, religious groups, students, the armed forces, and veterans that was allowed to participate in the electoral process on the same level as political parties. Backed by the power of the military, the bureaucracy, and a large budget, Golkar came out of the poll as a single majority. Golkar went on to win every subsequent election until 1999, when for the first time in Indonesian history an independently monitored election took place. In the early years of the Suharto presidency, the political process was directed primarily by the government. As the new order matured, however, power came to rest almost exclusively in the person of the president. After the 1971 election, the existing political parties were consolidated to form two officially recognized parties: the United Development Party, Partai Persatuan Pembangunan (PPP), and Indonesia Democratic Party, Partai Demokrasi Indonesia (PDI). Technically, these parties were to base their political platforms on the national ideology of Pancasila, 5 principles: believe in one God, nationalism, democracy, humanitarianism, and social justice. Also upheld by Golkar. Unlike Golkar, however, the political parties were prohibited from establishing chapters at the grassroots levels. The end of the new order and of the Suharto presidency in 1998 triggered a major transformation in Indonesia's political process. New election was allowed for independent monitoring for elections. Restrictions on the creation of political parties were lifted at all levels. Members of the bureaucracy were permitted to choose a party other than Golkar, and the military was forbidden from siding with any one political group. In 1999, election was both euphoric and peaceful, with the DPI now adding Perjuangan struggle to its name to become the Indonesian Democratic Party of Struggle, PDIP. Golkar and the National Awakening Party, Partai Kebangkitan Bangsa, PKB, emerging as the top parties with no single majority. These 3 parties have remained strong, although since the end of 20th century, several others have gained popularity alongside them. Among these are the Democratic Party, Partai Demokrat, PT, which became the presidential party in 2004, the National Mandate Party, Partai Amanat Nasional, PAN, and the Justice and Prosperity Party, Partai Keadilan Sejahtera, PKS. The election law states that all citizens who have reached the minimum age of 17 or who have married may vote in general elections. All those who have reached age 21 may stand for elections. Elections are direct and voting is by secret ballot. Security of Indonesia. The Indonesian armed forces were founded shortly after the country's declaration of independence in August 1945. The original forces were made up of soldiers who had been trained by the Dutch and Japanese armies, as well as the armed militia groups that had fought a guerrilla war to wrest Indonesia permanently from Dutch control. Under the Sukarno and Suharto presidencies, the armed forces of the Republic of Indonesia, Angkatan Bersenjata Republik Indonesia, ABRI, comprised the army, the navy, the air force, and the police. Following the Suharto presidency, the armed forces returned to one of their pre-Sukarno names, the National Army of Indonesia, Tentara Nasional Indonesia, TNI, and the police were split into separate units. The army, constituting more than 3/4 of the forces, has remained the largest segment of the TNI. Men must be at least 18 years old to join the armed forces. Selective compulsory service requires a commitment of 2 years. The political role of the armed forces increased significantly in the second half of the 20th century with the ABRI and later the TNI, justifying their political involvement by citing the so-called DWI function, dual function doctrine. This doctrine declared it both the right and the duty of the military to take part in most political decision-making processes in Indonesia. As the political power of the military grew, however, the allocation of state funds for defense development declined. The government's rationale in cutting its military spending was to promote peaceful relations with neighboring countries. It meant to establish territorial control through political intervention with the aid of a powerful intelligence network rather than through the use of force. Its small budget ultimately forced the TNI to find other sources of income. Widespread corruption ensued as the military abused its associations with foundations and government firms. Finally, the TNI was removed from the political process with the reformation of the MPR in 2004. All seats in the legislature that were once reserved for the military were eliminated. Thank you, viewers, for watching.